The frontier market of Kepler Station buzzed with the usual chaos of interstellar trade. Merchants from a dozen species hawked their wares beneath the artificial sun of the dome, their voices creating a symphony of alien languages and universal translator static. The air reeked of exotic spices, engine lubricants, and the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere. Captain Jake Morrison had seen many things in his 15 years hauling cargo across the Outer Rim, but the sight that greeted him in the slave quarter made his blood run cold. There, chained to a rusted post like livestock, stood a woman unlike any he had ever encountered. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin held an ethereal blue-silver sheen that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Delicate scales traced elegant patterns along her arms and shoulders, while her hair fell in waves of deep purple that caught the light like spun silk. Most striking were her eyes, large, luminous orbs of golden amber that held an intelligence that transcended species barriers. She was completely naked, her alien anatomy on full display for potential buyers. Bruises marked her skin in various stages of healing, and fresh cuts suggested recent abuse. Despite her condition, she held herself with a dignity that made Jake's chest tighten with an unfamiliar emotion. The slave trader, a greasy Vorthan with yellowed tusks and breath that could strip paint, noticed Jake's lingering gaze. "Ah, you have good taste, human. This is premium merchandise from the Anderthan system. Very rare, very exotic. She's been trained for entertainment purposes." Jake felt his jaw clench. The woman's eyes met his for a brief moment, and he saw something there that made his heart skip, not defeat, but a fierce intelligence calculating her options. She wasn't broken, merely waiting for her moment. "What's her story?" Jake asked, keeping his voice neutral despite the rage building in his chest. The Vorthan rubbed his hands together eagerly. "Found her on a derelict research vessel near the Void Nebula. Only survivor. Her species is unknown. My xenobiologist couldn't classify her. But look at those features. Those curves. She'd make an excellent addition to any collection." Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The woman was being discussed like an object, a piece of exotic art to be owned and displayed. Around them, other traders and customers moved past with casual indifference, as if the sight of a sentient being in chains was nothing more than background noise. "Has she spoken?" Jake inquired, surprised by his own interest. "Oh yes, she speaks standard quite well. Educated, this one. Probably some kind of scientist or scholar before." The Vorthan made a dismissive gesture. "Before she became more useful in other ways." The woman's eyes flicked to Jake again, and this time he saw something else. Hope, perhaps, or recognition that he was different from the others who had looked upon her with hunger rather than humanity. Jake had made his fortune in the gray areas of space commerce, transporting goods that governments preferred not to know about. He had told himself that everyone in the Outer Rim was fighting for survival, that moral luxury was for those safe in the core worlds. But, standing here, looking into those golden eyes, he felt something shift inside him. "How much?" The words escaped his mouth before he could stop them. The Vorthan's eyes lit up with greed. "For a discerning customer such as yourself, 40,000 credits. She's worth every cent, completely disease-free, still young, and, as I mentioned, quite intelligent. She can serve multiple purposes." 40,000 credits was Jake's entire profit from his last 3 cargo runs. It was supposed to fund repairs to his ship's aging hyperdrive and keep him in business for another year. It was also more money than most frontier workers saw in a lifetime. Jake looked at the woman again. She was watching him with an intensity that suggested she understood exactly what was happening. Her lips moved almost imperceptibly, and he could have sworn she mouthed the word please in standard. "I'll need to see proof of ownership papers," Jake said, pulling out his credit chip, "and a full health scan." The Vorthan's excitement was palpable. Of course. All perfectly legal, I assure you. The salvage rights were properly filed with the Frontier Authority. She's yours to do with as you please." As the transaction proceeded, Jake found himself studying the woman more closely. Despite her obvious alien heritage, there was something achingly familiar about her expressions, her posture, the way she carried herself even in chains. She reminded him of someone, though he couldn't place who. The health scan revealed fascinating details about her physiology. Her bone density was 30% higher than human normal, suggesting adaptation to high gravity. Her lung capacity was extraordinary, and her blood showed traces of elements that shouldn't exist in a carbon-based life form. Most intriguingly, her brain scans showed neural pathways unlike anything in the known databases, not primitive, but evolved along entirely different lines. Remarkable, the medic muttered as he finished his scans. I've never seen anything like her. Her cellular structure suggests an incredibly advanced healing factor. And these readings here. He pointed to his scanner. I'd swear she's capable of some form of natural electromagnetic manipulation. The transaction completed, Jake found himself the legal owner of a sentient being whose species remained a complete mystery. As the chains were removed from her wrists and ankles, she rubbed the raw marks left behind, her golden eyes never leaving his face. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying a melodic quality that seemed to resonate in harmonics beyond human hearing. "My name is Lyralii." Jake nodded, unsure of what came next. He had acted on impulse, driven by something he couldn't quite name. Now he owned a person, a concept that sat in his stomach like a stone. "I'm Jake Morrison," he replied. "And we need to get you some clothes." As they walked away from the slave quarter, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made the most important decision of his life. Behind them, the Vorthan counted his credits with glee, already planning how to spend his windfall. But Jake's mind was elsewhere, focused on the mysterious woman walking beside him, and the questions that multiplied with every step. Who was Lyralii? Where did she come from? And why did he feel like the universe had just shifted on its axis? Jake's cargo ship, the Stellar Wanderer, had seen better decades. The corridors were narrow and utilitarian, lined with exposed conduits and patched bulkheads that told stories of countless repairs. But it was clean, functional, and, most importantly, it was home to Jake Morrison, the first real sanctuary Lyralii had known in months. She stood in the small cabin Jake had given her, running her fingers over the simple but clean clothing he had purchased at the market. A basic jumpsuit, undergarments, and boots. Nothing fancy, but to someone who had been naked and chained for weeks, they felt like royal garments. "The refresher is through there," Jake had said awkwardly, pointing to a small door. "Take all the time you need. We won't be departing for another few hours." Now, as she stood under the sonic shower, Lyralii allowed herself to truly process what had happened. She had been prepared to die in that market, had actually been planning how to provoke her captors into ending her misery rather than face another buyer with hungry eyes and cruel intentions. Then, this human had appeared. Jake Morrison was not what she had expected from a human. The few she had encountered in her previous life as a xenobiologist had been either coldly professional researchers or crude frontier traders. Jake seemed different. There was a gentleness in his eyes that contrasted sharply with his weathered appearance and obvious experience in the rougher parts of the galaxy. When she emerged from the refresher, she found Jake in the ship's small galley, preparing what appeared to be a meal. The sight stopped her short. When had anyone last prepared food for her rather than simply throwing scraps her way? "I wasn't sure what you could eat," Jake said without looking up from his work. "Figured I'd start with basics and see what worked. Rice, vegetables, some protein that should be compatible with most carbon-based life forms." Lyralii settled carefully at the small table, still adjusting to the concept of chairs and dignity. "You're very kind. Most humans I've encountered in recent months have been different." Jake set a plate before her and, finally, met her eyes. "I'm not most humans, I guess. Eat slowly. Your stomach probably needs time to adjust to real food again." The food was simple but delicious, seasoned with care and prepared with obvious attention to nutrition rather than mere sustenance. As Lyralii ate, she studied her rescuer covertly. Jake was perhaps 40 standard years old, with graying hair at his temples and hands scarred from years of mechanical work. His clothes were practical, well-maintained, but clearly not expensive. Everything about him suggested a man who lived by his own code in a universe that often rewarded compromise. "May I ask you something?" Lyralii said after several minutes of comfortable silence. Jake nodded, working on his own meal. "Why did you purchase me? I saw how much you paid. That was no small sum for someone in your position." Jake was quiet for a long moment, chewing thoughtfully. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I saw you there, saw how they were treating you, and something inside me just couldn't walk away. Maybe it was stupid. Not stupid, Lyralii said softly. Dangerous, perhaps. Expensive, certainly. But not stupid. What happened to you? Jake asked. The trader said something about a derelict research vessel, but I got the feeling there was more to the story. Lyralii's expression darkened, and her fingers tightened around her utensils. My people are called the Veilthra. We're explorers, scientists. My team was investigating unusual energy readings near the Void Nebula when we encountered something we shouldn't have. She paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. There are things in deep space that most species prefer not to acknowledge. Ancient things. Hungry things. They attacked our ship, killed my colleagues. I only survived because our emergency systems ejected me in a life pod before the ship was consumed. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard whispers in spacer bars about things in the deep void, but had always assumed they were tall tales meant to frighten rookies. I drifted for weeks before a salvage crew found me, Lyralii continued. Pirates, really. They saw my exotic appearance and realized I would be worth more alive than dead. They sold me to slavers, who sold me to others, who eventually brought me to Kepler Station. Your people, do they know what happened to you? Lyralii's laugh held no humor. The Veilthra are isolationists. My expedition was unauthorized, considered reckless by our council. If they know I'm missing, they likely assume I got what I deserved for venturing beyond approved territories. Jake absorbed this information, beginning to understand the true magnitude of Lyralii's situation. She wasn't just displaced. She was completely cut off from her own kind, alone in a galaxy that saw her as either a curiosity or a commodity. What will you do now? He asked gently. I don't know, Lyralii admitted. I have no ship, no resources, no contacts beyond Veilthra space. Legally, I suppose I belong to you until... No. Jake's voice was firm, cutting her off. Nobody belongs to anybody. That paperwork was just what I needed to get you out of there. As far as I'm concerned, you're a free being who can make her own choices. Lyralii stared at him in amazement. You're serious? You spent 40,000 credits just to set me free? Seemed like the right thing to do. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in thought. Finally, Lyralii spoke again. 3 weeks into their partnership, Jake was beginning to understand just how much his life had changed. The Stellar Wanderer had never run better. Lyralii's electromagnetic abilities allowed her to diagnose and repair problems that would have cost him thousands at a proper shipyard. More than that, her scientific background had opened up entirely new opportunities for cargo contracts. Their current job was a perfect example. While Jake had previously hauled generic freight and occasionally smuggled restricted items for desperate clients, Lyralii had secured them a contract transporting rare biological samples for a legitimate xenobiology research facility. The pay was excellent, the work was legal, and, for the first time in years, Jake felt like he was moving up in the universe rather than just surviving. Hyperdrive efficiency is up 12%, Lyralii reported from the engineering console, her hands dancing over the controls with impossible precision. I've also recalibrated the navigation sensors. We should arrive at Proxima Research Station 4 hours ahead of schedule. Jake shook his head in amazement. In 15 years of hauling cargo, I've never had a ship run this smoothly. You're wasted on a bucket like this. This bucket saved my life, Lyralii replied, not looking up from her work. Besides, efficiency improvements are just the beginning. I've been analyzing your ship's design, and I have some ideas for modifications that could increase cargo capacity by 30% without compromising structural integrity. Modifications cost money we don't have. Actually, they don't. Lyralii finally turned to face him, her golden eyes bright with enthusiasm. Most of what I'm proposing involves redistributing existing space and optimizing power distribution. The only external components we'd need are some standard conduits and a few specialized processors, maybe 3,000 credits total. Jake stared at her. 3,000 credits for modifications that would typically cost 10 times that amount. And she was talking about improvements that would revolutionize his earning capacity. How do you know so much about starship engineering? I thought you were a xenobiologist. I am, but Valefor education is quite comprehensive. We're taught to be self-sufficient in space, engineering, navigation, emergency medicine, even basic combat techniques. My people have been exploring the galaxy for millennia, often alone in small ships. Before Jake could respond, their communication system chimed with an incoming message. He activated the receiver, expecting routine traffic control instructions from Proxima Station. Instead, a harsh voice filled the bridge. Stellar Wanderer, this is Captain Dex Corgan of the mercenary vessel Bloodhawk. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Jake's blood turned to ice. Corgan was a notorious pirate who operated in the Outer Rim, preying on merchant vessels and selling their crews to slavers. The Bloodhawk was a heavily armed assault ship that could reduce the Stellar Wanderer to scrap in minutes. Jake Morrison, Corgan's voice continued with obvious satisfaction. I hear you've acquired some very interesting cargo. My employer is willing to pay handsomely for your blue-skinned friend. Lyralii went rigid beside him, her face pale. They're here for me? Seems that way. Jake's mind raced through their options, none of them good. The Bloodhawk would be faster, better armed, and crewed by experienced fighters. Running would only delay the inevitable. You have 10 seconds to comply, Corgan announced, or I start shooting. Jake's hand hovered over the engine controls, preparing to cut power, when Lyralii suddenly stood. No, she said quietly, but with such conviction that Jake's hand froze. I won't be taken again. I'd rather die first. Lyralii, there might be another way. There isn't. She moved to the ship's engineering panel, her fingers beginning to glow with blue energy. But there is something I haven't told you about my abilities. Time's up, Morrison. Corgan's voice crackled through the comm, cutting engines for you. The Bloodhawk's tractor beam locked onto the Stellar Wanderer, and Jake felt their ship slow despite his attempts to maintain speed. Through the viewports, he could see the sleek Predator ship closing in, weapons charged and ready. Lyralii, whatever you're thinking, trust me. Her voice was calm now, focused. But you might want to strap in. Jake quickly secured himself in his pilot's chair as Lyralii placed both hands flat against the engineering console. The blue glow around her fingers intensified, spreading up her arms and across her entire body. The ship's lights dimmed as power began flowing in directions it was never meant to go. What the hell are you doing to my ship? Jake demanded. Showing you what Valefor science can accomplish when properly motivated, Lyralii replied through gritted teeth. The Stellar Wanderer's entire hull began to emit a faint blue radiance. Jake's instruments went wild, showing energy readings that should have been impossible for a cargo hauler to generate. Outside, he could see the Bloodhawk's crew frantically working at their stations, clearly confused by what they were seeing. Warning shot across their bow. Corgan ordered over the open comm channel. Show them we're serious. The pirate ship's forward cannons fired, sending brilliant bolts of energy toward the Stellar Wanderer. Jake braced for impact, but the energy beams never reached them. Instead, they struck an invisible barrier surrounding the cargo ship and dissipated harmlessly. Impossible, Corgan snarled. No cargo hauler has defensive shields that strong. Lyralii was glowing like a blue star now, her entire being focused on channeling energy through the ship's systems. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonic overtones that made Jake's skin tingle. Jake, I need you to target their weapons array and fire everything we have. We don't have weapons. We do now. Jake looked at his weapon controls, which had been dark and dead for years, and saw them blazing with activity. Somehow, Lyralii had converted the ship's cargo handling systems into improvised weapons. This is going to hurt, she warned. Jake targeted the Bloodhawk's gun batteries and fired. Instead of the weak plasma bolts he expected, coherent beams of electromagnetic energy lanced out from the Stellar Wanderer. The pirate ship's shields flared and failed under the assault, and secondary explosions rippled along its hull as their weapons overloaded. Retreat! Corgan shouted over the comm. All stop. We're withdrawing. The Bloodhawk limped away, trailing atmosphere and debris, its weapon systems completely disabled. Jake stared in amazement as the larger, more powerful ship fled from his converted cargo hauler. Lyralii collapsed into her chair, the blue glow fading from her skin. She was breathing heavily, and Jake could see the effort had taken a significant toll on her. How? He asked simply. Emergency protocol, she gasped. Velthra ships are equipped with systems that allow the crew to temporarily convert any vessel into a warship if threatened by the entities from deep space. I've never tried it on an alien ship before, but the principles are universal. Jake helped her to the medical bay, his mind reeling from what he had witnessed. In the space of 10 minutes, his cargo hauler had become a vessel capable of defeating a heavily armed pirate ship. More than that, he was beginning to realize that Lyralii was far more than she had initially revealed. Who were you really? He asked as he helped her onto the medical bed. Before the attack on your ship? Lyralii met his eyes, and, for the first time, he saw something like fear there. Senior Xenobiologist Dr. Lyralii Vathis, she said quietly. Specialist in deep void phenomena and first contact protocols. And the daughter of the Velthra High Council's military commander. Jake felt the universe shift around him once again. He had rescued what he thought was a simple alien scientist, only to discover he had actually saved the daughter of a military leader from a species with technology that defied known physics. This complicates things, he said finally. Yes, Lyralii agreed. I'm afraid it does. The revelation of Lyralii's true identity changed the dynamic aboard the Stellar Wanderer in ways Jake was still trying to understand. As they continued toward Proxima Research Station, he found himself studying his partner with new eyes, seeing details he had missed before, the unconscious authority in her posture, the way she analyzed problems with the systematic approach of someone trained for command, the subtle confidence that spoke of a lifetime spent among the galaxy's elite. You're treating me differently, Lyralii observed as they shared breakfast in the galley 3 days after the encounter with the Bloodhawk. Jake paused with his coffee halfway to his lips. Am I? You're more formal, more distant. Before, you saw me as an equal partner. Now you see me as... She gestured vaguely. Something else. Nobility has a way of complicating things. I'm not nobility, Lyralii said firmly. Yes, my father holds an important position, but Velthra society isn't built on hereditary privilege. I earned my rank through study and achievement, just like anyone else. Jake set down his mug and studied her carefully. But you are someone important. Someone who matters to people with power. That attack yesterday, they weren't after a random escaped slave. They were after you specifically. Lyralii nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that. The timing, the resources Corgan had at his disposal, the fact that he knew exactly where to find us. Someone with significant resources is very interested in capturing me alive. Any idea who? Several possibilities, none of them good. Lyralii stood and began pacing the small galley. There are factions within various governments who would love to get their hands on Velthra technology. There are also corporate interests who see profit in exploiting my people's abilities. And then, there are the entities from deep space. They have been known to work through intermediaries when pursuing specific goals. Jake felt a chill. You think those things that attacked your ship might be behind this? It's possible. My research team discovered something significant before we were attacked. Something that certain forces might kill to keep secret. Before Jake could ask for more details, their ship's proximity alarms began chiming. Through the viewport, Proxima Research Station came into view, a sprawling complex of interconnected modules orbiting a gas giant. But something was wrong with the picture. Those aren't research vessels, Jake said, studying the ships docked at the station through his scope. Those are military cruisers. 3 of them. Lyralii joined him at the viewport, her face grim. Terran Federation Navy. And, unless I'm mistaken, those are ships from Admiral Harrison's task force. You know the Admiral? By reputation. He's one of the Federation's most aggressive commanders when it comes to alien affairs. Not someone known for diplomatic solutions. Their communication system activated without warning, broadcasting on an override frequency that Jake couldn't shut off. Stellar Wanderer, this is Admiral Marcus Harrison aboard the TFS Retribution. You will dock at Base 7 and surrender your alien passenger immediately. Any attempt to flee or resist will be met with lethal force. Jake's hands moved to the navigation controls, but Lyralii caught his wrist. Don't, she said quietly. Those cruisers could destroy us before we cleared the station's gravity well. And if we run now, We'll be fugitives for the rest of our lives. So what do you suggest? Lyralii was quiet for a moment, her golden eyes distant with thought. We dock, but we do it on our terms. 30 minutes later, Jake and Lyralii walked down the docking tube to face whatever waited for them aboard Proxima Station. Lyralii had insisted on wearing her simple jumpsuit rather than anything that might indicate her true status. But Jake noticed she carried herself with the bearing of someone preparing for battle. Admiral Harrison was waiting for them in the docking bay, flanked by a squad of armed Marines. He was a tall, imposing man with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades commanding ships in hostile space. His eyes locked onto Lyralii immediately, studying her with the focused attention of a predator evaluating prey. Dr. Lyralii Vathis, he said without preamble, daughter of High Commander Thelon Vathis of the Vaelthra Military Council. You've been a very difficult woman to locate. Admiral Harrison, Lyralii replied calmly. I wasn't aware the Terran Federation was so interested in my whereabouts. The Federation is interested in anyone who possesses advanced alien technology, especially technology that could be weaponized against human interests. Harrison gestured to his Marines, who raised their weapons. You're coming with us, Doctor. Your friend Morrison is free to go. Jake stepped forward. She's not going anywhere without. Mr. Morrison, Harrison interrupted, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had commanded fleets in wartime. You've done your civic duty by bringing this alien to our attention. The Federation appreciates your patriotism. But this is now a matter of planetary security, and civilians have no place in such discussions. Planetary security? Lyralii's voice carried a note of incredulous anger. Admiral, I'm a xenobiologist, not a weapons designer. You're a Vaelthra with access to technology that could shift the balance of power in this sector. Harrison's expression was implacable. The Federation has a right to evaluate potential threats, and your people's isolationist policies make diplomatic channels impossible. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach as he began to understand what was really happening. This wasn't about security. It was about technology acquisition through force. You're talking about kidnapping a foreign scientist, he said carefully. I'm talking about protecting human interests, Harrison replied. The Outer Rim is becoming increasingly dangerous. Pirates with alien weapons, unknown entities attacking our ships, entire colonies going silent without explanation. We need every advantage we can get, and Dr. Vathis represents a significant strategic asset. Lyralii's hands were glowing faintly blue at her sides, and Jake could see her preparing to fight. Against armed Marines in an enclosed space, it would be suicide, but he also understood that she would rather die than be taken prisoner again. Admiral, Jake said, stepping between Lyralii and the Marines. Before you make what could be a very serious diplomatic mistake, maybe you should know that Dr. Vathis has already chosen to work with humans voluntarily. Harrison's eyes narrowed. Explain. We're partners, Jake said, the words coming faster as an idea formed. She's been helping improve human shipping technology, sharing her scientific knowledge in exchange for protection and resources. What you're proposing would destroy any chance of voluntary cooperation between our species. One alien scientist hardly represents her entire species. No, but she represents the daughter of their military commander. How do you think High Commander Thelon will react when he learns his daughter was kidnapped by human forces? For the first time, Harrison looked uncertain. The Vaelthra were an unknown quantity, but their technology was clearly advanced beyond anything in the known galaxy. Starting a war with them over one scientist would be catastrophically stupid. Furthermore, Lyralii added, her voice carrying new confidence, I've already transmitted detailed reports about my experiences to several independent news networks. If anything happens to me here, the story of human forces kidnapping an alien scientist will be spread across every communication channel in the sector within hours. Harrison's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. I don't bluff, Admiral. I plan. And I've been planning for this possibility since the moment we detected your ships. Jake watched the standoff with growing tension. Marines versus alien technology, diplomacy versus military force, truth versus political expedience. The next few moments would determine whether they walked out of here free or whether this became an interstellar incident. Stand down. Harrison finally, ordered his Marines. Dr. Vathis, you're free to go. For now. But understand that the Federation will be watching your activities very closely. As they walked back toward their ship, Jake could feel the weight of Admiral Harrison's gaze following them. They had won this round, but he suspected the game was far from over. That was either very brave or very stupid, he told Lyralii once they were safely aboard the Stellar Wanderer. Probably both, she admitted. But I meant what I said about transmitting reports. The truth has a way of protecting itself, even when powerful people would prefer to keep it hidden. As their ship pulled away from Proxima Station, Jake realized that their partnership had evolved into something much more significant than either of them had originally intended. They weren't just business partners anymore. They were allies in a much larger struggle, one that would determine how humanity and alien species would interact in the dangerous frontier of space. 2 months after their encounter with Admiral Harrison, Jake and Lyralii had established a routine that worked well for both of them. Their cargo hauling business had evolved into something far more sophisticated, with Lyralii's scientific expertise opening doors to contracts that Jake could never have imagined. They were making more money than he had ever seen, but, more importantly, they were building something that felt like a real partnership. That sense of stability was shattered when they received an unexpected message while docked at Freeport Station, one of the largest independent trading hubs in the Outer Rim. Jake Morrison, the holographic figure said as it materialized in their ship's communication center. The speaker was clearly Velthera, with the same blue-silver skin and purple hair as Lyralii, but older and bearing the unmistakable bearing of military command. I am High Commander Thelon Vathis. I believe you know my daughter. Jake glanced at Lyralii, who had gone completely still beside him. Her golden eyes were wide with shock and what might have been fear. Commander Vathis, Jake replied carefully. It's an honor to meet you. The honor is mine, Captain Morrison. Your actions in rescuing my daughter and treating her with dignity have not gone unnoticed. The Velthera Council has been monitoring developments in this sector with great interest. Father, Lyralii said quietly, finding her voice. I thought the Council had written me off as lost. Phelan's expression softened slightly. Never, my daughter. Reckless, perhaps. Overly curious about things better left alone, certainly. But never lost. Your unauthorized expedition caused great concern, and when your ship disappeared near the Void Nebula, we feared the worst. Then, why didn't you send search teams? We did. 3 ships, some of our best scouts. None returned. Phelan's face darkened. Whatever you encountered out there has been spreading, Lyralii. Systems that were thriving 6 months ago are now silent. Entire star clusters have gone dark. The entities you disturbed are moving toward inhabited space, and we believe they're specifically hunting for you. Jake felt ice form in his veins. Hunting for her? What? Because she saw something she shouldn't have, Thelon replied. Tell me, daughter, what did your team discover before the attack? Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, as if gathering courage to speak words she had kept locked away. We found a structure, she said finally. Ancient beyond measure, built by a species that existed before any of the current galactic civilizations. It was partially phased out of normal space, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And, her father prompted, inside, we found records. Historical data about the galaxy's past, including information about previous extinction events. Cycles of destruction that have repeated every 50,000 years for millions of years. And we learn what causes them. Jake's mouth went dry. What? The entities aren't invaders from outside our galaxy. Lyralii continued, her voice growing stronger as she shared the burden she had carried alone for months. They're a cleanup mechanism, a kind of cosmic immune system designed to prevent any single species from growing too powerful or spreading too far across the galaxy. That's impossible, Jake protested. Who would create such a thing? The species that built the structure. They called themselves the architects. They seeded the galaxy with life billions of years ago, and they built safeguards to ensure that their children would never repeat their mistakes. Thelon nodded gravely. The Council has suspected something like this for generations. Our oldest records speak of the long dark periods when the stars themselves seemed hostile to life. We thought they were myths. They're not myths, Lyralii said. And, according to the records we found, the next cycle is about to begin. The entities have been monitoring galactic civilization, and they've determined that we've reached the threshold that triggers their response. Jake tried to process what he was hearing. A galactic extinction cycle. Ancient machines designed to cull civilization. It sounded like madness, but he had seen what the entities could do to a starship, had witnessed Lyraliai's terror when she spoke of them. "Why are they hunting for you specifically?" he asked. "Because I copied some of the records before our ship was attacked," Lyraliai admitted. "Not everything, but enough to potentially understand their programming and maybe find a way to communicate with them or even shut them down." "You still have this information?" Lyraliai tapped her temple with one blue finger. "Stored in my neural implant. The pirates who captured me never knew what they really had." The Elon leaned forward in the hologram, his expression urgent. "Daughter, you must come home immediately. The council needs to examine this data, and you'll be safer in Velthra space." "Will I?" Lyraliai challenged. "Father, I love our people, but the council's response to any threat has always been to withdraw further from galactic civilization. If these entities are triggered by technological advancement and species expansion, isolation won't save us. It will just delay the inevitable." "Then, what do you propose?" Lyraliai looked at Jake, and he saw determination burning in her golden eyes. "We fight, not with weapons. That would only prove to the entities that we're exactly what they were designed to stop. We fight with cooperation. We share information with every species in the galaxy, work together to find a solution, prove that we can be better than our ancestors." "That's impossible," Elon said flatly. "The major powers would never cooperate on such a scale. Humans, Kithara, Centauri, Vorthan, they can barely maintain trade agreements, let alone coordinate a response to an existential threat they don't understand." "Maybe," Jake said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "But they might listen to someone who's already proven that cooperation works. Someone who's built successful partnerships across species lines." Both Velthra looked at him with curiosity. "Think about it," Jake continued, warming to the concept. "Lyraliai and I have shown that humans and Velthra can work together effectively. Our partnership has been profitable, peaceful, and mutually beneficial. If we can demonstrate that on a larger scale, maybe we can convince others to follow our example." "You're talking about becoming ambassadors," Lyraliai realized. "I'm talking about becoming proof that the entities are wrong," Jake replied. "That galactic civilization can evolve beyond the cycle of expansion and destruction that triggered their programming." Elon was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing their words. Finally, he spoke. "It's dangerous. If you're wrong, if cooperation fails, the entities will interpret it as confirmation that the cycle must continue. The consequences would be galactic extinction," Lyraliai finished. "Yes, Father, I understand the stakes. But doing nothing guarantees the same result. And you trust this human enough to stake the fate of all civilization on your partnership?" Lyraliai turned to Jake, studying his face with an intensity that made him feel transparent. After a moment, she smiled, the first truly joyful expression he had seen from her since they met. "I trust Jake Morrison with more than my life," she said. "I trust him with our future." Elon nodded slowly. "Very well. The Council will not officially sanction your mission, but we will not interfere either. You'll have the resources we can provide covertly, and if you succeed—" He paused, as if hardly daring to voice the possibility. "If you succeed, you'll have saved not just our species, but all species." "And if we fail?" Jake asked. "Then, at least we'll have tried something other than hiding and hoping the storm passes over us," Elon replied. "That alone would be worthy of honor." As the hologram faded, Jake and Lyraliai found themselves alone with the weight of an impossible task. Save the galaxy through cooperation and understanding, or watch it burn in ancient fires of extinction. "So," Jake said finally, "where do we start?" Lyraliai smiled again, and this time it was full of anticipation rather than fear. "With the one thing we do best. We find people who need help, and we help them. One partnership at a time, until the galaxy learns that cooperation isn't just possible, it's essential." Jake nodded, feeling a strange sense of destiny settling over him. He had rescued one alien woman from a frontier market, and somehow that single act of humanity was about to become the foundation for saving civilization itself. Well then, he said, activating their ship's navigation systems. Let's get to work. 1 year later, Jake Morrison stood before the assembled representatives of 17 different species in the Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Prime, the galaxy's most neutral meeting ground. The irony wasn't lost on him. A year ago, he had been a simple cargo hauler scraping by on the outer rim. Now he was about to address the largest gathering of galactic leaders in recorded history. Beside him, Lyralii radiated calm confidence despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Over the past 12 months, they had traveled to dozens of worlds, building a network of cooperation that had seemed impossible when they started. They had mediated trade disputes, facilitated technology exchanges, and proven again and again that different species could work together when they focused on mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition. But all of that had been preparation for this moment, the moment when they would reveal the truth about the ancient cycle of extinction and ask the galaxy to unite against a threat most couldn't even comprehend. Distinguished representatives, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the assembly hall's acoustics. 1 year ago, I was nobody special, a freight hauler making a living in the outer rim. Today, I stand before you not as a representative of humanity, but as someone who has learned that our differences are far less important than what we share. He gestured to Lyralii, who stepped forward with the easy grace that had become familiar to audiences across the galaxy. My partner, Dr. Lyralii Vathis, and I have spent the last year demonstrating something that many thought impossible, that species with different biologies, different cultures, and different goals can work together for mutual benefit. We've helped establish trade partnerships that have increased prosperity across multiple sectors. We've facilitated technology exchanges that have advanced medical research and improved living conditions on dozens of worlds. Ambassador Corvin of the Kithara Empire, a massive reptilian being with scales that shifted color based on his emotions, leaned forward. Your achievements are noted, Captain Morrison. But why have you called this assembly? What threat could possibly require such unprecedented cooperation? Lyralii activated the holographic display at the center of the assembly hall, showing star charts with dark regions spreading like an infection across multiple sectors. 17 star systems have gone completely silent in the past 6 months, she said. No distress signals, no debris fields, no evidence of conflict. Entire civilizations simply stopped existing. Piracy, suggested Ambassador Vex of the Centauri Collective, her crystalline form refracting the holographic light into prismatic patterns. Or perhaps some new form of warfare. No, Lyralii replied firmly. My research team encountered the cause before they were killed. Ancient entities, older than any of our civilizations, designed to prevent any species from growing beyond certain parameters. They're not invaders, they're a galactic immune system, and they've determined that current civilization levels represent an infection to be cleansed. The assembly hall erupted in voices speaking dozens of languages, universal translators struggling to keep up with the cacophony of disbelief, fear, and anger. Jake waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. I know it sounds impossible. A year ago, I would have thought it was madness. But I've seen the evidence. I've witnessed their technology. And I've learned that our only chance of survival is to prove that we can evolve beyond the patterns that trigger their response. Admiral Harrison, now representing the Terran Federation's interests, stood from his delegation's section. Even if we accept your claims about these entities, what makes you think cooperation will save us? If they're as powerful as you suggest, maybe our only option is to fight. Fighting is exactly what they expect, Lyralii replied. Their programming is designed to eliminate species that respond to challenges with violence and expansion. Every time a civilization has chosen warfare over cooperation, it has confirmed their assessment that organic life inevitably becomes destructive. Then, what do you propose? This from Chancellor Thex of the Vorthan Republic, his tusked face skeptical but attentive. Jake activated a new section of the holographic display, showing interconnected networks spreading across the galaxy like a web of light. We propose the Nexus Protocol, he said. A formal alliance not based on military might or economic dominance, but on shared knowledge and mutual aid. Every species contributes their unique strengths to solve problems that affect us all. Instead of competing for resources, we work together to create abundance. Instead of viewing differences as threats, we celebrate them as opportunities for growth. Idealistic nonsense, snorted Admiral Harrison. Species don't cooperate on that scale. It's not in our nature, isn't it? Lyralii challenged. Captain Morrison and I are living proof that cooperation works. Over the past year, we've helped broker agreements between species that had been enemies for generations. We've seen Kythera engineers working alongside Terran scientists, Centauri artists collaborating with Vorthan craftsmen, Valephra researchers sharing discoveries with anyone willing to learn. She gestured to the assembled delegates. You're all here, in the same room, breathing the same air, despite coming from worlds with different gravities, different atmospheres, different evolutionary paths. If that's not proof that cooperation is possible, what is? Ambassador Corvin's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. You're asking us to fundamentally change how we interact with each other, to trust species we viewed as competitors or threats. We're asking you to evolve, Jake said simply. Not biologically, but socially. To prove that intelligent life can grow beyond the cycles of expansion and conflict that have defined galactic history for millions of years. And if we refuse? Asked Chancellor Thex. Lyralii's expression grew grave. Then, in approximately 18 months, when the entities finish their current cleansing operations, they'll move to the next phase of their programming. Every world with significant technological development will be targeted. Every spacefaring civilization will face extinction. The assembly hall fell silent as the representatives contemplated the magnitude of the choice before them. There is another consideration, said a new voice from the back of the hall. High Commander Thelon materialized as a hologram, his presence causing ripples of surprise through the assembly. The Valephra had not participated in galactic politics for centuries. The Valephra Council has voted to end our isolation, he announced. We're prepared to share our technology, our knowledge, and our resources with any species willing to join the Nexus Protocol. Consider this our commitment to the future my daughter and Captain Morrison have envisioned. The silence that followed was profound. The Valephra possessed some of the most advanced technology in the known galaxy, and their offer to share it freely was unprecedented. Ambassador Corvin was the first to speak. The Kythera Empire formally accepts the Nexus Protocol. The Centauri Collective agrees to participate, added Ambassador Vex. One by one, the representatives voiced their commitment to the new alliance. Even Admiral Harrison, after a long moment of consideration, pledged the Terran Federation's cooperation. As the assembly hall filled with the sounds of species making history together, Jake felt Lyralii take his hand. Her golden eyes were bright with tears of relief and hope. We did it, she whispered. We started it, Jake corrected. Now comes the hard part, making it work. 3 months later, the first test of the Nexus Protocol came when a joint fleet of ships from 12 different species encountered the entities at the edge of the Void Nebula. Instead of opening fire, they broadcast a simple message, the Nexus Charter, signed by every major civilization in the galaxy, pledging cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, and growth over dominance. The entities paused their advance for the first time in recorded history. Communication was established. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's children spoke directly with their ancient guardians. The conversation that followed would reshape the understanding of life, intelligence, and purpose throughout the cosmos. Jake Morrison had rescued an alien woman from a frontier market because it seemed like the right thing to do. That simple act of human decency had become the foundation for the greatest transformation in galactic history, proof that sometimes the smallest choices could change the universe. As he stood on the bridge of the new Nexus flagship, watching ships from dozens of species working together to explore the galaxy's greatest mysteries, Jake smiled. He was still nobody special, just a freight hauler who had made a friend. But sometimes, that was enough to save everything that mattered. The galaxy had learned to cooperate. The ancient cycle was broken, and, for the first time in millions of years, the future held infinite possibility instead of inevitable extinction. The naked alien woman abandoned in a frontier market had become the catalyst for galactic salvation. And the human who looked again, who saw a person instead of property, had become the bridge between species that would carry civilization into a new age of cooperation and growth. In the end, it wasn't advanced technology or military might that saved the galaxy. It was the simple recognition that every being deserved dignity, respect, and the chance to contribute their unique gifts to the greater whole. It was the most human thing imaginable, and it had taught the entire galaxy how to be better. I have nowhere to go, Jake Morrison. My people won't welcome me back, and I have no resources to start over anywhere else. But I do have skills, extensive scientific knowledge, familiarity with dozens of star systems, and certain abilities that might prove useful to someone in your line of work. Jake raised an eyebrow. What kind of abilities? Lyralia held out her hand, palm up. After a moment of concentration, a small sphere of blue-white energy appeared above her skin, crackling with contained power. My people evolved in a high-radiation environment, she explained as the energy ball danced between her fingers. We developed natural electromagnetic manipulation as a survival trait. I can interface directly with electronic systems, generate EMPs, even create limited force fields. Jake's eyes widened. Such abilities would indeed be incredibly valuable in his line of work, bypassing security systems, dealing with hostile ships, emergency repairs in dangerous situations. I'm offering to work with you, Lyralia said, dispelling the energy sphere. Partnership, not servitude. I pull my weight, contribute my skills, and, in return, you provide me with a place in this galaxy until I can find my own path. Jake considered her proposal. Taking on a partner was a big step, especially one with such a complicated background. But something about Lyralia felt right, as if the universe had somehow brought them together for a reason. Okay, he said finally. But we do this as equals. You're not my property, my servant, or my debt. You're my partner, with equal say in decisions that affect both of us. Lyralia's golden eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. Thank you, Jake Morrison. I won't disappoint you. As their ship prepared to depart Kepler Station, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a dramatic turn. He had come to the station as a simple cargo hauler. He was leaving as something else entirely, though what that might be, only time would tell.